Good afternoon. I'm delighted to introduce this year's student speaker, Timothy Sean Baliot Ignacio.
Woo! Hey!
Tim is a political economy major who has taken courses from across many of our majors, including one with me. It is rare that I get to do this because no one who has ever written me a thank you note before has been student speaker. But I do save such notes, even if they're written on an index card. And in this particular instance, I would like to read it in its entirety because I think it leads nicely into Tim's speech today. And because I think it expresses the sentiments of many other students towards my colleagues. Professor Karras, thank you for challenging us. I know it must be extremely frustrating to deal with students who do not express any genuine interest in matters that you put so much time and effort into teaching. However, as one of your students, as well as someone who has struggled to give this class and its material the attention it deserves, I want to sincerely thank you for not giving up and holding on to the hope that our education will cause us to think more about the world we live in and do something to make a difference in it. In addition to writing notes to faculty, Tim plays basketball, jams on his guitar, dances, and has recently, I'm told, gotten into rapping. Tim would especially like to dedicate his degree to his aunt, Amelia Baliot, who never got to wear a robe, but is still the bedrock of her siblings, and his grandmother, Nertisha Baliot, with whom he would not be walking across the stage today. As an aside, Tim did not tell his family that he was delivering today's speech. So, surprise! After graduation, Tim plans on working for InterVarsity Campus Ministries and the Galingbada After School Program, while also taking steps to return to the Philippines. Ladies and gentlemen, graduates, please join me in welcoming Tim Ignacio.
Good afternoon, faculty, fellow graduates, family, and friends. I come before you honored to be chosen as your student commencement speaker and grateful that, unlike the honors thesis, this didn't have a 3.6 GPA requirement. I hope that my speech pays tribute to all we have accomplished as a graduating class, while also challenging us to do even more. So I didn't get the new iPhone last Christmas. To be completely honest, for a privileged millennial like me, it was a pretty tough decision. After all, I had grown accustomed to my biannual phone upgrades and have long been convinced by the guy with the English accent narrating the commercials that Apple's latest phone is going to change my life and maybe even end world hunger along the way. But I didn't get the new iPhone last Christmas. Here's why. In August of 2012, I strolled onto campus as a cheery freshman, brimming with confidence. Armed with my faith in both God and free markets, I took just about every opportunity I could get to win you converts. I raised my hand, even in the huge classes, like Professor Olney's Econ 1 or Professor Zook's Pax 10 class. I actually went to office hours, picking at the minds of accomplished individuals like Professors Ann Swidler, Alan Karras, and Jillian Hart. And I even did my readings, so I could argue against them in discussion sections. But to be frank, I didn't really win anyone over with my arguments explaining how price gouging in the aftermaths of disasters like Hurricane Katrina is ethical, though I probably could have gotten an internship at Fox News. But unlike the many soapbox preachers who have frequented Upper Sproul, as long as I wasn't convinced, I was right, even if no one believed me. Before I continue on with this story, it's important to understand where I come from. I am a second-generation Filipino-American from the suburbs of the Central Valley. And in case you're wondering where that is, it's basically everywhere in California that's not the Bay Area or Los Angeles. My community was small, middle to upper middle class, white, and religious. With characteristics like these, you could probably find a picture of my hometown if you looked up conservative on Google Images. But this isn't a diatribe against white suburbia. This is a story of how the child of Filipino immigrants learned to espouse the same rhetoric used to colonize the land from where his family came. Rather than learn about how the United States defied the Filipino people's demands for independence, I was told that McKinley's little brown brothers needed protection and guidance. My teachers explained that there was no such thing as a free lunch, that Reagan ended the Cold War, and that gays were taking over the country, all the while providing strawman arguments to represent opposing views. And so I became a product of where I was from, not unlike a Columbus or Cortez, who I heard Professor Karras teach about in IAS 45. I came to Cal with the ambition to save souls and change minds, never exactly asking how my community had figured out how to solve the world's problems and nobody else did. Then in the summer of 2014, before my junior year, I took an opportunity to live with the urban poor of Metro Manila through InterVarsity's Global Urban Trek. For 4 weeks, I lived with 12 young men who gave me a hands-on lesson in what third world poverty looked like. Together, we ate with our hands, we slept on the floor, and we played endless games of basketball in our bare feet. And though I remember these moments fondly, what I saw and experienced from my time there jarred both my theological and political leanings bred by suburban comfort. I was left with questions, asking for more than what I had to answer them with. As I returned to Cal that fall, I had unknowingly become more open to other points of view. Though I still put my faith in what our majors would call liberalism, I was ready to meet the other schools of thought with an open mind. And that's exactly what happened when I walked into 2040 VLSB for Professor Crawford's PE 101 class, Contemporary Theories of Political Economy. Towards the end of the semester, we were challenged to rethink how we understood the existence of wealth and poverty. Perhaps, we were told, the world's poor are not impoverished because they simply lack things like good governance and a work ethic, but are poor because someone needs them to be. Maybe the proletariat class Marx had so notoriously championed never found upward mobility, but are now working in the sweatshops of Bangladesh and India, unseen by our privileged eyes. In thinking of Marx's two antithetical classes on a global level, I was reminded of the people I met in Manila. I had seen, before my own eyes, the sort of abject poverty that had fueled the rage of a young Karl Marx towards an unjust system. And if the same problems he saw still exist, then could his critiques of the market economy's inherent contradictions actually be valid? What does this mean for the masses of impoverished people living in the wake of structural adjustment, debt, and free trade agreements? The kind of people I had the privilege to play basketball with in my bare feet. And how is this all connected to the countless diasporas that have forced so many families like mine to leave their homes for their children's future? But before I attempt to dive deeper, I'll leave those questions for our next speaker, Professor DeLeon. After all, her DS 100 course was what taught me how to even ask those kind of questions. I'll now return to my original point, why I didn't get the new iPhone. Last fall, I took GPP 115, the Nanya Roy class. And in one lecture, we watched a video discussing the local effects of tech companies in San Francisco. As I'm sure most, if not all of you are aware, tech's arrival has facilitated processes of gentrification, dramatically raising the prices of everything from rent to food. What's more, private transportation purchased by these companies, like the notorious Google buses, have unintentionally inconvenienced local residents by clogging up public bus stops. Being in an auditorium full of Berkeley students, it goes without saying that my peers were getting frustrated by what we were learning. After all, whether it's free speech violations or tuition hikes, you can bet that students at this university will not sit quietly. Having myself been changed by my experiences and what I had learned in my classes, like Professor Hart's Big D and Little D development. Yeah, I remember. I was no longer compelled to argue that the changes in San Francisco were providing jobs. I had become more concerned about those who would be without homes. But I was also reminded about how, in any market, there are always two sides, supply and demand. While these companies were obviously the producers, I and my disgruntled classmates were the consumers. In other words, we were the reason they moved in. And what's more, many of us were going to work for them once we graduated. So as angry as I was at our Googles and Apples for displacing communities, my actions actually supported what they were doing. And so I decided not to get the new iPhone. It wasn't to put Apple out of business, nor was it to start a movement. I did it because a trip to Manila and a Berkeley education provided the perspective I needed to see the world differently. I also did it because if a company was forcing people out of their homes, I didn't want to add to their profit margins. And yes, I know, the reality is we still need to buy things from big corporations. We also need jobs, and as newly graduated millennials, we're going to take just about whatever we can get. At the end of the day, we all just want to buy our own piece of the pie and do some good along the way, right? Ironically, on the last day of Professor Hart's DS100 class, I asked a similar question. Sure, we can talk all we want about everything from climate change to systemic racism, but that's not going to get us jobs. With a job market that values coding more than it does writing, can we IAS majors really do something with the way Berkeley taught us to see the world? My apologies if I'm getting a little bit cynical. I was told that these graduation speeches were supposed to be inspiring, but inspire you all to do what? Oftentimes it's to inspire you to give, right? Give your time, energy, resources to something you care about, and if we all do this, we'll make the world a better place. I'm sure we've all heard it before. But what if the world is more affected not by what we give, but by what we take? The clothes we buy, the neighborhoods we move into, and the phones we get for Christmas. A well-known rabbi once said that before we point out the speck in someone's eye, we should first take out the much larger one in our own. While our degrees in Asian studies, development studies, Latin American studies, Middle Eastern studies, peace and conflict studies, and political economy have all trained us to do the former, will we do the latter with the lives we live after today? Fellow graduates, while you all deserve to be congratulated for what you have accomplished, remember that so many people wish they could be sitting where you are today. And the decisions we will make, even just basic consumption habits, will have an impact on their lives. It may sound hard, but it's much easier to remove the speck in our own eye than it is to remove it from someone else's. So, how about we start with our phones? After all, that's where we so notoriously spend most of our time looking anyways. In a few months, there's probably going to be another new iPhone. The only difference is, this time around, you'll have what countless people from Metro Manila to San Francisco will never get to hold in their hands. A diploma from the University of California, Berkeley. What will that mean to you? And what will that mean for them? Graduating class of 2016, you tell me. Congratulations, and go Bears.
Thank you, Tim. Wow, these are the moments when we faculty are even more proud. Today marks the end of your wonderful